everyone. Welcome to the Washington Times Politically Unstable. My name is Kelly Sadler, and I'm the commentary editor at the Washington Times. Today, I am joined by Rene Jax, the author of Misled by Doctors, How a Sex Change Ruined My Life. And Rene, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Kelly. How are you doing today?
I am doing just fine. So I would love you to share your experience, what you based this book off of, to our readers. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your story?
Sure. Thanks for having me on today. I listened to your interview with the doctor, I guess about 4 days ago. You were also talking about children and sex changes. I was born a boy. And because of being raised in a single home with a crazy woman, I was really confused about how to be a boy. At this point in my life, I realized that families, if you've got children, you need to have both a man and a woman in the home. And growing up so confused about myself and what being a man was, by the time I was about 12 or 15, about that age, I really had the belief that I hated my body. I hated being a man. I hated everything about being a man. And if I were a girl, my life would be better. And as a result of that, by the time I was probably 22, I had made the decision I had to live as a woman. And so I had lived presenting myself as a woman for about 12 years with just taking estrogen. Then in 1990, I went through with a full sex change and had lived up until about 3 years ago presenting myself as a woman. The estrogen took a terrible toll on my body because males' bodies should not have estrogen in it. And I kept learning the lesson that this idea of gender affirming surgery, it's a fallacy. All doctors are doing is creating a eunuch, someone who is sexless, someone whose health is compromised because of the surgeries, because of the drugs they give. And about 3 years ago, I detransitioned. You know, I'm an adult now. I'm in my 70s. I detransitioned, went back to living as a guy, got off of the estrogen. And it took about a year, Kelly, before my health cleared up. I was having a lot of cardiology problems, and my health cleared up. My health has not been this good in probably 15 to 18 years. So about 8 years ago, I started seeing through the cracks of this fallacy of sex change and wrote the book, Don't Get on the Airplane, Why a Sex Change Will Ruin, it not only ruin my life, it ruins everybody's life.
So when you, when you were 12 years old and going through this confusion, you said you were living with your single mother at the time. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I did, but they were much older and they were out of the home.
Okay. And so you were going to school and you just didn't like your body.
Well, let's be honest. No kid going through puberty likes their body.
Yeah.
But because I didn't have a family to fall back on to help explain this, it just got out of hand. Nobody going through puberty, you wake up one day and you're taller. You wake up one day and for girls, your breasts fill out. You wake up one day, you start bleeding. Another, for guys, you wake up and you start having erections all the time. So nobody was there to explain that to me. And that gender confusion, I am now convinced, the pandemic of gender confusion we see in the kids now. In your last guest that you were talking to this about, you were talking about it being a social contagion. And, you know, I wrote my book before Lisa Littman released her study. And I almost went along with her study, but what I believe now is there's so many dysfunctional homes. There's so many one-parent homes that it's not a social contagion so much as a breakdown in social family structure.
Now, when you started going through puberty, and it's an awkward time for every single person on this planet. One of the worst. Everyone. Did your mother start taking you to doctors?
No.
Or to a therapist? Or did you have anyone to talk through this with?
Absolutely not. And because of her situation, I ended up reading a lot of the early textbooks by John Money. Back in the early 70s, there was Robert Jesse Stoller, who was associated with Stanford, and I read his book, Sex and Gender, and his second book, which was Transsexuality. And at that point, I got the idea, oh, I must be a girl trapped in a boy's body. So this whole medical fallacy helped trip me up. And I think if I had any kind of male figure in my life, if I had gotten any kind of mentor to help me through puberty and young adulthood, it would have been, the outcome would have been different.
So you spent your entire time as a teenager confused, not knowing where to go. Well, no, but I mean, because you said you got the sex change when you were 22, correct?
Right. Well, Kelly, I'm laughing because I went through puberty and young adulthood confused. I went through my middle ages confused. I went through my senior years confused, because the medical profession, especially now with gender affirming care, the medical profession doesn't know how to deal with gender confusion.
So when you went to seek help at 22, you wanted to sex change.
Yeah.
How were you met by the physicians treating you? How did that whole process start, and how did you go along that path?
Well, the average doctor had no back, and we're talking in the early 1970s.
Yes.
They had no understanding of gender confusion, and most of them could not treat me. So I was living in California at the time. I was referred to a clinic called the Center for Special Problems. It was a special problem back then. And the doctor had dealt with transvestites and heroin addicts and drag queens for about 10 years. And I walked in the door, told him what my confusion was. And instead of treating me, he just gave me a prescription for estrogen. That was it.
So what made you then go through with surgery?
If you read my book, I love being an author. You can always say, if you read my book, I put this in that I had lived as a woman with male genitalia between the time I was about 23, 24, and then 12 years later, when I was making the decision, I had to do something. I had to get out of the conundrum that was my life. And I realized I did not know at age 35, I did not know how to be a man. I only knew how to be a eunuch. I only knew how to be a freak, living on the edge. And I didn't want to be in transition any longer. I didn't want to live on that fence another day. I called it a fence. So I resigned myself to the fact that this was my lot in life. And having resigned myself, well, this is it. And I can't go back to some place I've never been, which is malehood, living as a man, an adult man. And I went through with the surgery. I'd gotten the money together in 1990, went to Trinidad, Colorado, and it fixed some of the angst I and many of my friends who've had the sex change have gone through. It gets rid of some of the anxiety for a little bit of time, for 6 months, a year and a half. But then the gender dysphoria, the body dysmorphia, which is what it really is, it comes back and it keeps coming back. And that's why there's a tendency with all of the young kids. They think if they get the girls think if they get testosterone, they'll be fine. But then they realize they have to cut off their breast and it'll be fine. And the same thing happened to me. I had the complete sex change, and about a year and a half later, I was still miserable. guess what? The surgery doesn't cure that.
So what eventually led you to seek a reversal?
The tipping point for me was about 9-10 years ago. I had a core group of friends who were post-operative we called it transsexuals, people who had complete sex changes, 2 girls that had become boys, and about 5 boys had sex changes. And over a course of about 3 years, they kept committing suicide. One here, one there, and I'd get an email, I'd reach out, where's John, where's Larry, where's Sally, and they kept committing suicide. And this is something you should know, and your listeners should know, that the high suicide rate of transgender people is not kids who haven't had the surgery, but people who have had the surgery. Keep that in mind. This is post-operative patients who are suicidal. And that's because the medical industry, the Psychiatric Association, APA, have said this is going to cure your problems. This is the best we got to offer you. And when you get into this and suddenly it's not, and you're still living on the fringe of society, you're still uncomfortable in your body because you're using plastic surgery for an emotional problem to fix something that's broken emotionally, then it becomes an untenable situation. And my friends started committing suicide. And when the last one of my friends, after about 3 years of this, most of them were 5, 10, 15 years post-op. When the last one of my friends, and I looked around and all of them were dead, I said, I need to assess this for myself. So it was that beginning process of the last of the death of my trans friends that I went back. I reread all of the research, every paper that had been published in 30 years. I looked at the history of the surgeries and the people starting giving estrogen to confused boys. And I said, this is bupkis. This is just bupkis. I was fed a lie. I believed a lie. And there is no gender. In my mind, there is no gender. Gender was a fallacy, really promoted by Jesse Stoller. And as a result of that, I had to come up with, even though I was going into my late 60s at the time, Kelly, I had to come up with the truth. And the truth was, I just didn't like my body. I didn't like my lot in life. And as a result of that, I said, I wrote the book, Don't Get on the Plane, did a lot of touring all over the country. I spoke in Asia, I spoke in Australia, I spoke all over Europe, trying to convince these young kids, which now is an epidemic, that this is what life is. Life is confusing, life is difficult. So that was the tipping point. And the funny thing, I'll tell you the funny thing about all this, Kelly, I've been the same person here as I was when I was living after surgery. I'm the same person now as I was when I first started cross living. I'm the same goofy person that I was in high school. I have not changed, but what the difference is, I've learned to live in my own skin.
And you said your health is better than it ever has been. It's because you're not taking the you're not taking the hormones any longer. And what was that process of detransitioning like? That must have been very tough.
It was awful. I started estrogen in 1977. I transitioned in 1979, 2 years later, and it reduced my cardiac efficiency, respiratory efficiency by about 70%. And I'd had problems, chronic problems, just for years and years and years. My family, no one in my family had digestive problems. I have massive number of digestive problems. No one in my family has had a heart attack. I had heart attacks, multiple heart attacks. And when I decided to get off of these toxins, I really believe they are toxins, Kelly. In my heart, I see the damage that like the testosterone does to young girls, and none of them look healthy. Not a single one of them look or act healthy on the T. And when I stopped, my body went in shock. First off, I had no natural testosterone to counteract it. And I went on testosterone injections for a short time. And then I thought, no, I'm just perpetuating this, because the testosterone you get from the doctors, from Planned Parenthood and such, they're not actual one-on-one replacements for your own body's chemistries. I don't know if you've been on women's birth control. The women's birth control of estrogen and progesterone doses, it plays hells with your body and your mind and your menstrual cycle. And now we are seeing, birth control really came into its own life in about 1970, 71, 72. And we are now seeing long-term studies of women who, because they went on birth control, could no longer have children. They have higher incidences of cervical cancer, and it goes on and on and on and on. So once my body was free and clear of it, I stopped going to emergency rooms for heart palpitations, and it's funny because now people say yes, sir, yes, no, sir, as opposed to yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And I'm the same person. So I'm a little slow. All my friends will tell you I'm a little slow. And it took me 60 something years to figure out it's just who I am. I'm a tall, goofy person. And here I am now. I'm still lecturing. I'm still writing books. I'm seeing a lot with the younger generation who are taking massive doses of estrogen and testosterone. One of the books I've written 25, 26 books. One of the books I recently published was Transgender Monsters, The Killers That Walk Amongst Us. And I published that because there's an entire generation of young psychotics, sociopath transgenders running the streets, harming people. And so there are consequences to these drugs, to this ideology that is damaging not only the individual, worse than having heart palpitations, but creating psychosis. The whole idea of being a victim, and there is a genocide, quote unquote, genocide against transgenders, that allows a lot of emotionally unstable people to then lash out at people because they are true victims and they're being hunted in the streets. These are things you hear all the time. So I thought as I'd get older, I'd get away from the transgender ideology and talking and lecturing about it. And that unfortunately hasn't happened. And I fear I'll probably, I'm old, as you once said about John McCain, he's old and he's going to die soon. And I figure I'm old and I'm going to die soon. And I'll probably go to my grave having to talk about this issue to the point that I die, because it's in a pandemic, an epidemic phase in our society, in Western society. I even see it down in Southeast Asia. There's transgender communities in Saigon. There's, of course, in Thailand. You see it in Australia. So this whole loss of understanding of what it means to be a woman, of what it means to be a man, our societies, it's not cultural drift as the leftists would say, but it's really a cultural collapse, I believe. Or, The divorce rate used to be 1 in 1,000. Now it's 30 or 40 in 1,000. After the sexual revolution of 1970, the divorce rate went from 300,000 people in the United States per year up to 1.5 million. And it hovered there up until the pandemic. So our societies are struggling. The family structure, as you know, I've listened to your podcast. I've watched you for some time. And all of your guests are saying the same thing from different areas. Society is struggling. Women are struggling in this new role that's been created, this new definition of what being a woman is over the past 60 years since the bra burners. Men are confused. Men are dressing up as girls because they don't know how to be a man. And does that matter? I think it does. And I see the drug overdoses, the violence, the breakdown of society, our communities being unsafe. All of this ties back into it, as does gender, I believe, into people are just, they're out there. They're, unfortunately, the new generation, as you know, I assume you know, is very narcissistic and self-centered. And when you watch these things on YouTube, a cop pulls a Gen Zer over and says, "Give me your driver's license." And they say, no, I'm not going to give you my driver's license. And this is all a sea change. And the whole thing with gender, I come back to it. And the fact that almost 20 of the states in the United States pay for the sex changes, Massachusetts being one of them. New Hampshire, they don't have a sex change clinic up in New Hampshire, so they send them down to Cedars-Sinai that has the sex change clinic on the Lower East Side. So this issue of children being confused and then turning to drugs and alternative lifestyles to try to fix their problems. I think if they had better parents, if they had a cohesive parent who wasn't so busy having me time, I think they could get through it. And, I'm using my own flawed example to base a lot of these opinions on.
Your own personal experience, and the breakdown of the traditional family structure has been something that we've documented in our pages for years now, decades. However, reversing that trend almost seems impossible. What do you think are the some of the first steps we can do as a society to remedy this situation? Does it start with the medical community? Does it start, with people getting married and staying married and having, going to a church and having that community? That genie seems to be almost out of the bottle at this point.
I believe it is. Kelly, you are articulate and intelligent, and you have put the donkey squarely on the tail squarely on the donkey. I don't mean to be negative. Nobody likes a doomsayer, but we have half of this country that wants open borders. We have half of this country that is okay with late-term abortions. We have half of this country that will put non-residents in five-star hotels while their own residents struggle with high cost of inflation and $6 a gallon gas. And I believe the only thing that ever has dealt with situations like this, it's not the first time this has happened in a culture, in an empire. The only thing that's happened is these have collapsed and something new came out of it. There was a study not long ago that said men think and talk about the Roman Empire at least once a week.
Yeah, I read that as well.
Okay. And here's my chance to talk about the Roman Empire, is that the Roman Empire was around for 500-600 years. It's one of the longest lasting empires. And it collapsed about the time, around 400 AD, after death. It then took until Garibaldi in 1850 to unify Italy. Now think about that. That's a 1400-year period of chaos. You look at Europe, and the face of Europe after the time of the Romans has changed and changed, and it's changed some more. And just a couple months ago, it changed again with Crimea and the Dansk version portion of the Ukraine. It continues to change. And the United States, we've been around for 250 years. And I believe it's in the process of changing right now, Kelly. That's my gut feeling. It's my intellectual opinion on it as well. It's not just a feeling. It's my belief. And something will come out of this. And I believe it will be conservatives and people who are religious and women who don't want to have 1,000 partners in one weekend. You'll have the progressive leftists living up in New York and Vermont and eating Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And then you'll have people living down in Texas who are God-fearing, don't like abortions, and eating barbecue. And it's overly simplistic. Something will come out of this. I don't know what it looks like. Nobody knows. And from studying history, we see that there's lots of attempts to consolidate. People need to be consolidated, and people need to work together. The whole idea of Western individualism, which I love the movies, the Western John Wayne movies. So, John Wayne out there on the horse all by himself. But here's the thing. All of the communities, Dodge, Yuma, Arizona, Dotson, Leadville, they were all founded by communities, by tribes, by a group of people who have the same values. And that will happen again. And right now, unfortunately, you have places like Texas where you have Austin with people who are throwing rocks at police. So it's not going to be the same situation as the first American Civil War, but it's going to change. And the gender, which unfortunately I will live and die with my whole life, the gender is what is that mythical beast that has 9 heads? Each head represents a failing of society. And because of that, gender is just one aspect of it. And the sexual promiscuity of 12 and 13-year-old girls is another. The violence, the lack of authority is another. And it goes on and on. The drug abuse. It's all part of it. And it's a change. And so what we do is we have to strengthen, I'll get on my little soapbox. Those of us who understand what the importance of family and God and community, we have to strengthen those ties by really getting involved with our churches much more than we ever have in the past, whether it's a synagogue or a temple or a Southern Baptist. It doesn't matter. We have to get much more involved in it. We have to support the people around us who are in those communities that are struggling. So it's up to us to strengthen our ties. And if you've got a niece or nephew struggling with gender dysphoria, reach out to them and say, okay, you're confused right now. Come and hang out with my family, have dinner with us, and hang out with if you're a boy, hang out with my husband. He's going to fix the lawnmower. Mm-hmm. If you're a girl, come on in the kitchen. I'll teach you to make biscuits. Mm-hmm. And it's having a foundation for the family as you know, is the foundation of culture, is the foundation. Mm-hmm. And right now the family is a mess. It's a mess in New York. It's a mess in small town in Missouri. It's a mess because the economic conditions that strive and force both parents to go out and work. And so they put, like Lisa Littman and many others have talked about in their writings around gender, is that you can't raise a child by giving them a smartphone and putting a game app That's not how a child learns to be a girl. That's not how a child learns to be a boy. It is how a child learns to be narcissistic, self-centered, and addicted to dopamine rushes.
Yeah, no, and I think there's also, a focus in our culture on quick fixes. You're going through a struggle. Here's a drug that you can take that will solve this. Here's, and that's where the gender affirming care that is being promoted by many hospitals around the country, and a lot of therapists are like, well, if you just do this, you'll be okay, and everything will be fixed. And the fact that there isn't that many long-term studies of this dysphoria, and you are a case study. I mean, I think you're probably one of the first people who dealt with this. You're at the very beginning of this trend that we're now seeing in the mainstream culture. But if your kid is not feeling right, just take them to this doctor and they'll fix it, which is not what parenting is. It's not on the quick fixes. It's helping your child get through the long-term struggles of life that everyone does go through.
Well, Kelly, you're still the same little girl that you were when you were 10 years old. There's a part of you.
And all. Yeah, I'm still stubborn, but
yeah. And here you are as an adult. You're married to a really handsome guy. I've seen pictures. I looked at pictures of you and your husband. I'm going, God, she lucked out. And I'm sure there are days through your life that you woke up like, I hate to remind you of this, the John McCain debacle, that you had no, it's like you feel like a little kid, and it's like the world is ganging up on you on the playground. And even as an adult, it's hard. And I think the fallacy and the fantasy that life's going to be unicorns and I don't know, roses and gold on the streets, as opposed to saying, it's going to get hard. And here's if we've got 1 minute, I'll tell you a quick story. A friend of mine is a long distance hiker, Peter Vacco, V-A-C-C-O. In his lifetime, he's hiked 16,000 miles solo without any sponsorship. And one time he was out, I think in Alaska, all by himself. He was working through heavy brush, and he was burning up the food he carried so fast he wouldn't make it to the next food drop. So he was 4 days out without food. And I asked him, we've been friends for 35 years, I think. And I said, how did you deal with it, i.e. emotionally? And here's his response. It is what it is. And that my parents didn't teach me that when you're ridiculed at school, or when you have a bad day at the office, or you say a flip remark off your cuff and all hell breaks loose, we are not taught. It is what it is. And you just, you pick yourself up, you buy the boots, and you just keep going. We keep looking, like you said, just so well said a moment ago, we're looking for the quick fix. There is no quick fix in puberty, but you can't tell a 14-year-old that. There's no quick fix when you're 25 and your girlfriend or your wife has left you. There's no quick fix to get through that emotional pain. It is what it is. And I think teaching moving forward, teaching our children, there are, in project management, I'm a project manager. There's a saying I keep on my wall. Project management, you have bad days and bad weeks and bad months and bad quarters and bad years. That doesn't mean you give up. That doesn't mean you become an ice skater. It is what it is, and you have to work through it. And our parents and the kids themselves, this is how I feel. Okay, honey. All of the Hollywood celebrity women who have trans their kids, the list just keeps growing. First, it was Sharon, her daughter, and who is it, Megan Fox, who now has 4 transgender kids. That's good. And poor Jazz Jennings, you look at her and you just go, God, kid, I am so sorry. You are so messed up. So long story short, this situation is going to continue. And right now, we can't fix all of it. It's so broken, Humpty Dumpty fell off a wall kind of thing. So we do what we can, and I continue to try to help parents of gender confused kids. The kids won't listen because they are in such turmoil in their culture and their society. And this is the silver bullet for them. God bless them. I'm sorry you're in pain, kid, but this causes more problems. And the other thing is, and I'll close on these remarks, Kelly, is that the sex change doesn't change your sex. It cuts out your sexuality. Your previous guest talking about this mentioned this. When you have your testicles cut out or your ovaries cut out, you become a eunuch. And that's a clean word for somebody who is without sexual drive or sexual desire. And it, as your other guest said, it cuts the very core of being a human being out of us, because our DNA is designed to hook up with a good-looking guy or a good-looking woman and have families. And if you cut that component out, then these transgender kids, like myself, like all of my friends, God rest their souls, they ended up just becoming sexless people without any desire. And without desire, it's hard to really get excited about life and get excited about your career and get excited about moving into a house with your new lover. All of that is being cut out by these doctors, and they're not going to be around when the shit hits the fan. Well, so it's an ongoing thing, and I really appreciate you inviting me on, Miss Kelly.
Well, thank you so much, Rene, for coming on and sharing your story. And hopefully there is somebody out there who might be going through this struggle, either with their child or individually, who can hear your story, your firsthand testimony, and have a new way of thinking about this topic and some of the downfalls that comes with it, and just to be warned, because I think society at large, or larger liberal society, says, this is all good. This is what you need to do to be a supportive parent, when, down the line, it really is the exact opposite. So Rene Jax, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
And Kelly, you keep up the fine work. It is what it is, and keep going.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye.